This is apropos. The harm that I've caused is beyond repair, the words of a retired surgeon who's gone on trial in Western France accused of the rape and sexual assault of 299 patients, the vast majority of whom were children. 74-year-old Joël Scouarnec told the court that he had committed despicable acts, already serving a 15-year sentence for earlier convictions. Victims' rights groups say this case raises uncomfortable questions for France's publicly run healthcare system. Mié Kohiyama has the details.
Mathis was just 10 years old when he was first taken to see Joël Scouarnec. It wasn't until a decade later that his grandparents found out their grandson was one of the doctor's alleged sex abuse victims. Mathis died of an overdose at 24 after struggling with addiction. Standing in front of the courthouse where Joël Scouarnec is standing trial, Mathis's grandparents say he'd still be alive if he had never met the former surgeon.
I can't wait to see him and tell him what's in my heart, that he killed our grandson. Obviously, he didn't put a gun to his head, but he killed him.
Mathis is one of 299 patients Scouarnec is accused of having raped and abused over the course of nearly 3 decades. Most were children at the time. Scouarnec has been convicted of sex crimes on 2 previous occasions. Back in 2005, he was handed a suspended 4-month prison sentence for possessing child pornography. Despite his conviction, Scouarnec managed to secure a job as a surgeon at a hospital in Western France the following year, where prosecutors say he continued his abuse. Protesters outside the courthouse want answers as to why Scouarnec was allowed to continue working.
This is typically a situation where the National Council of the Order of Doctors has almost certainly not done its job. The whys, the hows, that's for the judge to determine. But what is certain is that Joël Scouarnec slipped under the radar.
The evidence at the centre of this trial are the former surgeon's own diaries where he detailed the abuses. The 74-year-old has admitted to the vast majority of the charges, already serving jail time for earlier rape convictions. Scouarnec faces up to 20 years in prison if found guilty.
Well, for more on this distressing case, we're joined by Mié Kohiyama, co-founder of the Brave movement, and Be Brave France, also a survivor of abuse. Thank you so much for being with us on the programme, Mié. This man, as we've been hearing, managed to secure a job as a surgeon at a public hospital, several of them, in Western France, despite having been convicted of possession of child abuse images. He was even at one stage promoted to head surgeon at one hospital, despite management having been made aware of that conviction. So what does this trial tell us about how crimes against children are viewed and treated here in France?
This is a very good question, and the question of his suspended sentence for detention, consultation of child sexual abuse material, and then afterwards, he, when he was hired in this new hospital 2 years after, the director of this hospital said that it was only the internet, it was nothing physical, it was only the internet, so he could work in this hospital. And this is a real problem. It shows the collective denial in this story. As far as internet is concerned, now we have hundreds and millions of videos and images that are shared of child sexual abuse, violence that are shared in the world. And so we have to understand that behind those images are real crimes. So this story and this suspended sentence and the fact that this man, this doctor, was able to continue to practice shows the collective denial and all the work we have to do in order to fight with efficiency child sexual violence in France.
And Mié, this trial comes just 2 months, of course, after Dominique Pellico was convicted of enlisting dozens of strangers to rape his heavily sedated wife. The 2 trials do have some similarities. Obviously, the victims here much younger. We're talking about child abuse here. But these cases are provoking a lot of soul-searching about how France deals with allegations of abuse towards victims young or old. Do these high-profile trials actually succeed in changing attitudes, do you believe?
That's a very good question, and I guess the trial of Gisèle Pellicot and the trial of Le Scouarnec in matters of child sexual violence are not the first big trials we had in France. So there's this feeling that each time there's a big trial, we think that the society will understand. But those trials, even the Gisèle Pellicot trial and this trial, shows how much free are some perpetrators, how the system of impunity, I remind you that in France, there are only 4% of victims of child sexual violence that are filing a report. Less than 1% are getting to a trial. So it shows the major impunity on those issues. And I would like that we are not waiting to have those big trials so that society opens really its eyes on this hard reality, and that the politicians in office do take the right measures to efficiently end child sexual violence.
Yeah, because one of the issues you've campaigned about yourself is the statute of limitations here in France. Some of the alleged victims of this surgeon, they weren't actually able to take part in this trial because those alleged crimes happened outside that statute of limitations. Is that something you're still campaigning to have changed?
Of course, and you're speaking about survivors because these persons are not officially victims, and those survivors will be heard in this trial. They will be heard, but they won't be acknowledged as victims. And this is a major problem. The statute of limitation is a major discrimination. It's a major injustice. It allows many criminals over the years to commit many more crimes. And this is something that we have to fight for. And I remind you that 35 countries in the world have suppressed statute of limitations. And this is very important for victims and survivors.
And you yourself are a survivor of child sexual abuse. For those people who are able to take part in this trial, obviously going to be a very difficult few months for them, many of them completely unaware of what had happened to them until they were contacted by police. Will this trial, do you think, help them come to terms with what actually happened when they were children?
I don't think we can expect any kind of healing through the just judicial system, but at least it's a judicial answer, and that is very important. And you were talking about the fact that many survivors were called by the police because this perpetrator had some notebooks in which he wrote about these crimes. And many of the survivors that are part of this trial didn't know they were actually survivors of this criminal, and they had what we call repressed memory. They didn't have the memory, they had a traumatic memory of the crime, they had all the symptoms, all the sufferings, but they didn't have the conscious of it. So first it was a shock for them. I think they went through a very difficult path. I really hope that the judicial answer can bring some relief to them. But for survivors and victims, this kind of crimes are really long-term impact, and the judicial answer is only one answer, one aspect of the answer, one aspect of the healing, but there's also the care that those survivors need to have, and there's also a societal answer that we need to give against to end child sexual violence. So the judicial answer is only one aspect of the answer.
And one of those groups representing child survivors, it's actually filed a complaint also against judicial authorities and the health ministry, because seemingly, you know, the hospitals that were involved in hiring the surgeon, some of them were aware of his crimes, the possession of child abuse images. So what questions need to be answered by judicial authorities and by the health ministry at that time, do you think?
Absolutely. This is a very important. These are real work that we have to do to find answer to this collective denial. Absolutely, because there were failure at every step of the society. As you talked about, there was the failure of the some aspect of the investigation, the police investigation, failure of the health authorities, failure of the administrative authorities. So it is very important that those responsibilities are examined and that we are better in making break the silence before years and years, decades of a criminal path and 299 victims. This case shows that we have to make progress in the way that we end those kinds of criminals and that we end the impunity of these perpetrators. So how do we break the silence earlier? How every step of the society, every officials that are responsible, or every authorities that are controlling those doctors or teachers when it's teachers, how do we make the report system better in France? This is a very important question.
Mié, thank you so much for being with us on the programme this evening. We really appreciate your time and your insight. That is Mié Kohiyama, co-founder of the Brave movement here in France. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from us.